Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam, hello, peace to you all. Welcome to the stream. I'm Adnan Husain. We are live. Welcome everyone to the channel. East is a podcast, listeners. We're streaming also on that and maybe even on Twitter. Who knows if we're actually up on Twitter? Hopefully, we'll find out. But welcome to everyone. It's another edition of Office Hours with Professor Adnan Husain. This is our third edition. I'm so excited. I just love these audience engagement opportunities where I get to be with you, see what's happening in the chat, respond to your questions, comments, and just have more sense of a dynamic engagement where we can have a relaxed chat with a guest. And without further ado, I should bring in somebody who should be familiar if you've been watching this channel, because in fact, actually, the two videos he's been on, I think, are two of the top three on this new young channel, the Adnan Husain Show, because the area of specialty he has, which is the subject we're going to be discussing today, is Iran. We're going to be talking about the revolution and resistance, and he is an Iran scholar, a modern Middle East historian, but really, especially an Iran scholar. It's Dr. David Yagubian from Cal State San Bernardino. Bernardino. Dave, it's great to have you on live.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I love the new format. So I'm already a fan. So hopefully we'll generate some more.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. And I have to say, Dave is a big supporter of this channel, not only with his knowledge and erudition and enthusiasm, but he's somebody who really supports something when he supports it. And we're very grateful for everything that he's doing to keep us on the channel, doing a lot of content that's free and available to you. So that is just a reminder that, of course, like the stream right now. If you're on, please like the stream. Maybe you can share the video on your social media and say, hey, this is happening right now. Get in here if you want to know about Iran. You're not going to get this level of and depth of knowledge really anywhere else on most shows. So that's something that you should do right now. And of course, subscribe to the channel. We've got like over 2,000 who are subscribers now. We could boost that up, but it's so wonderful to have a growing community and a growing audience for more engagement, interaction, and discussion, knowledge, learning in this political and public educational project. Of course, if you can support us and make sure that we get to keep this free and available to everyone. If you can go to patreon.com/Adnan Husain and support the show. That's the main thing that you get. I mean, I release some of the episodes a little early, a few days early on audio, in audio format. You get priority for these live streams. If you want to pose questions, make comments, etc., we will definitely do our best to get to those first. Occasionally I might do some readings and commentary and so on, but the main thing is that you help keep us producing content free for everybody else. That's something that you can do. So give to Gaza. If you have a little extra and you want to do something, you can help support this channel. But Dave, why don't you tell people, people should know you because we've done a couple of episodes, but, just tell people a little bit about your work and who you are before we really dig into the topics.
Sure. Just a sort of quick basic bio. So I'll just go all the way back with some relevant points, but I was born in Iran in 1967 at the peak of the Iran-U.S. relationship, the year of the Shah's self-coronation. And as basically a teenager, experienced bullying because of my Iranian heritage, as my family had moved to the United States, and I grew up in Southern California. And so being Iranian in 1978 wasn't a problem. Being Iranian at Van Nuys Junior High School in 1979 was a problem, and that was grounds for getting your ass kicked. At which point, and this is all relevant, I started to ask my dad, like, hey, are we Armenian? Are we Iranian? Or are we American? And his response was yes. And so that sort of led to a lifelong quest to understand in full the complexity of Iranian national identity and my own association and affinity for and connections with Iran, which eventually led to my dissertation that I wrote at UC Berkeley. That's where I met Dr. Adnan Husain. We both studied together under Ira Lapidus and Hamid Algar. And so with my Iranian heritage and having been born in Iran, I have Iranian citizenship. Unfortunately, it wasn't until 2002 that I was able to go back because of the laws that would have required me to do military service at the time, and I didn't have time to do the push-ups in the military service. Since 2002, I've been visiting Iran at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. There was one 3 times that I went. And so frequent traveler to Iran. I have not lived, though, in Iran for any longer than, the months that I've been there. And so in 2003, took the position at Cal State San Bernardino in the Department of History, where, as per the title, I teach Middle Eastern and Islamic history. So let's say West Asian and Islamic history. And among those course offerings, I annually teach a course on Iran-U.S. relations, which is a sort of graduate style and structured seminar, but it's for senior undergraduates. And as well, I teach a course annually and have been really since 2002 titled Arab-Israeli Conflict. And so that has sort of put my classes and my statements, and I guess you could say myself, sort of at the forefront of the pushback by administration and by the donor elites, et cetera, against our university, against the programming that our Center for the Study of Muslim and Arab Worlds engages in. And so in conjunction with a memory post, and that is it's a Zionist affiliated outfit that posts what is considered to be sensationalist statements by scholars and activists. I did an interview with Adnan and Sina earlier in the summer, and some of the components of that were drawn out by memory and created sort of a little mini storm on the internets. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens when I come back to campus and begin to teach the classes that I teach annually and very much enjoy teaching. So with that, I'll just close by saying office hours, the genuine office hours that I have 3 times a week are, well, I'll be honest, they're sometimes kind of lonely because not too many students come. But when they do, it's truly one of the most enjoyable and rich experiences that we can have as university instructors. And the questions that students arrive with are simply just the best catalyst for discussion. So Adnan and I could go off for hours, as we were last night, just talking about this show. And so, like, hey, let's not talk about this now so we can talk about it tomorrow. But truly, the questions are really motivating and I think help to shape the conversation in a way that's truly meaningful and relevant to what's going on. So to the extent that people have questions, please, fire away and we'll do our best to address them.
Absolutely. I didn't get too many, maybe none this time from my posts and so on, but I'm going to rely on our engaged audience to post them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's why I wanted to call it office hours, is because oftentimes they are sort of lonely, but it's like an opportunity where any student could just walk in and get like a great kind of engagement, dialogue, conversation, have their answers questioned, and be inspired about learning. And that's what we love. And so I was actually, when I decided to create this, I knew I wanted to have you early on because you've always been such a dynamic and open teacher. And that's what I think of office hours as doing, is a kind of different sort of style. It's not one of these interviews that I do. I do a lot of those too with scholars, activists, and so on. But to be honest, I really enjoy this better. And this has also got a different kind of mood and atmosphere. It's just us two hang out in our offices and, chatting with one another, and then hoping that some students will drop by and that we'll get a chance to really get in and dig into things. So I just want to welcome people who in the chat. I see, you're a favorite professor of of someone here. So we've got a distinguished group in the chat, some repeat offenders. Verena Fraser has come back. Ode to John Trudell is back. Abram Zevuster, Ann Lee, a bunch of people are back. And some of these are people who are part of the autonomous collective kind of group that started during COVID, having kind of Zoom calls and sharing knowledge and so on. And I want to acknowledge that and say welcome to all these folks for coming in. It's great to see you. And at some point, I'm going to post in the description how if you want to kind of follow up and continue engaging with some of the people who come from that community, you can. It's a really fun and learned group. I also want to say to East as a podcast listeners and watchers, we're streaming on that channel too, just as we have before, just so that you know about it. But hey, it's time to come over to the Adnan Husain show. The discussion is happening there. We don't want divided discussions in two different places. So I'm going to be stopping the stream, momentarily. So go to Adnan Husain show and check out the live stream there so that you can be part of the discussion. That's what I hope you'll do. And like the video and subscribe to this channel too. Okay, well, we already have a couple of questions coming in, which is wonderful. And I see Resistance is Fertile. So I assume that this is Benji, who's one of the hosts of that fantastic show. And we're doing a collaboration on Monday, which will be a live stream on both channels, our discussion about geopolitical economy and the ends of capitalism with Professor Radhika Desai, who you all should know and be following. She's absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. So do stay tuned and connected. But I see that there's a bunch of great comments and questions already coming in, and Resistance is Fertile has posted, what is David, so it must be Benji, what is David's sense of where Iranian society is at now and the tensions between the reformists, quote unquote, apparently still trying to appease the US, and those who are preparing for the next battle? And this is something actually we talked about a little bit last night. We knew that this kind of a topic would come up. A lot of people think of there being a big factional division within Iranian government that's maybe reflective also of divisions within the society, of people who want to kind of still continue negotiations or still playing the game of the international law, international diplomatic negotiations, and others who are characterized as hardline, pro-Axis resistance, pro-resistance, that, we should just kind of do what's good for Iran and keep resisting. What do you make of this kind of apparent tension? What do you think of this?
I think some people probably would expect that I would sort of engage in this narrative and sort of advance it, that, oh yeah, there we got the conservatives on this side, or the hardliners and the reformists over here, and what's that Pezeshkian doing, and Arakchi going out and saying that we should still have dialogue. What is this? And this is all by design, in my view. The Iranian government is set up in a way that allows for this, if you will, good cop, bad cop, internal dialogue that is useful alternatively, either domestically for a domestic audience or for a foreign audience. And so I'll give you a specific example. So Pezeshkian did his interview with Tucker Carlson, and a bunch of commentators online got extremely upset and like, what the hell is Pezeshkian doing? And he's going out there and saying all these things, and he's basically just caving, and he should have taken a much harder line. And I had a completely different interpretation. I was clapping, saying, very well done. He is engaging in the role that is cut out for him within the structure of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The president has domestic prerogatives. The president may also comment on foreign policy, but Pezeshkian and whatever he says to Tucker Carlson or whatever he states publicly that could be his hope or his interest is frankly irrelevant to what is going to happen related to the military and related to foreign policy. Certainly Abbas Araghchi, as foreign minister, speaks to elements of how should I say this? What the current agenda is, as laid out by the leader, who is truly the commander in chief of the armed forces and who guides Iranian foreign policy. But Pezeshkian, Araghchi, they are playing a role that has been established for them, I think, very effectively. The Pezeshkian government is elected within the Islamic Republican system. Yes, there are checks and balances. There is vetting, just as there are checks and balances and vetting within our own political system and our own elections. But I think many people outside of Iran who perceive the power of presidents or prime ministers in other countries and understand their role in dictating foreign policy, they take Pezeshkian's statements as statements of government intent rather than as narratives put forward to kick the can down the road a few weeks or a few months, as, and I'll just come to, I think, a point that would relate to our discussion of whether or not there's going to be another attack, to enable the United States and Israel to continue their decline while Iran continues its slow, gradual, but its ascendancy. That is militarily and especially in terms of its global soft power and diplomacy. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. I see this whole dust up, consistently, and over the last, really, especially the last, say, 30 years, really beginning with Rafsanjani's presidency. This is built in, and so I don't think that observers should be that concerned when they hear Pezeshkian making conciliatory statements, calling for diplomacy or dialogue, because ultimately the trajectory of the Islamic Republic, its foreign policy, and its military will be determined by the supreme leader and not by the Iranian president. And until there is if and until there's a change in the system, this is how the government is going to operate. And so I don't share those concerns that Pezeshkian is going to sell out the Islamic Republic, or that Araghchi is going soft. Their rhetoric is purposefully diplomatic, conciliatory, and soft. We might also later talk about the bad cop side built into the mix here, such as Amir Mousavian's statement just a few days ago that Iran could whip up 24 nuclear weapons within hours, literally just within hours, and is ready to go. So the government has several different mouthpieces that operate simultaneously to achieve, I would say, one goal, and that is to buy time for the Islamic Republic to strengthen itself. But they take different approaches, and they forward different narratives. So this, I think, can be confusing to the uninitiated, and then to those who are initiated but don't really understand how this is purposefully baked into the mix. It can be upsetting, but I'll just say I'm not upset, because I understand exactly what's going on, and I applaud everyone for their performances. They should all receive an Oscar for them. But we can also add that on to, I would just say, when Araghchi comes out and says, "Oh yeah, they just obliterated our nuclear program, man. It's crazy. We don't even know what's going on there. It's just, we have no, I mean, where's the enriched uranium? Trump just obliterated it." So there's a reason for this. There's a reason why he is saying that, and there's a reason why Amir Mousavi comes out a couple days later and says, "Yeah, we got all the uranium and we're ready to whip up 24 devices within hours." And he stressed again, yes, hours, not days, hours. So who's telling the truth here? I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that the Islamic Republic has these ready-made narratives that enable it to buy time. And time is essential, considering the continual decline economically, militarily, diplomatically, in terms of the soft power of both Israel and the United States.
Yeah, I think that's a really important perspective, this question of time. This has been a resource that is being contested, right? Like whose time, who dictates the time on which this relationship develops and acts, and who's afforded and accorded time. I mean, this is the whole point with Iran has been trying to figure out ways, as we discussed in the episode we did together, some months ago, in fact, actually, which was, it has been since 1979, when all of these sanctions have been imposed on it, it has been having to try and find ways to survive, to circumvent those sanctions, to still have a pathway towards development. And the worst thing, it could do is derail its own kind of trajectory by preemptively or too early in, like, before it's really capable of of ensuring its deterrence, and of ensuring its progress militarily, economically, technologically, and so forth. But also, like, the point is that Iran is a major regional power. There's just no way it's not going to be considered one of the dominant countries in West Asia that has, as we've mentioned before, couple thousand years, at least more than 2,000 years of statecraft, of skill in diplomacy. And so when you say that it has this maybe a slightly more complex strategy and way of dealing with multiple narratives being out there in order to be able to buy time and so on, it isn't a naive state. It's not maybe every set of politicians and leaders have to make difficult strategic decisions, and sometimes they miscalculate or they misassess the situation. But overall, Iran has very competent, very sophisticated leaders who are steeped in a tradition of statecraft that has strategic depth. And as a result, for them, it's about outlasting this unviable, small enclave that refuses to really genuinely integrate into the region. It came as a settler colonial enclave that tried to impose a European, first world, Western imperial kind of polity and society in the middle of the Middle East, and to defend it as a kind of fortress and an expanding state, a violent, greater, Israel. This is really unsustainable, except because the entire West has been supporting it, right? And it's nonetheless not a long-term, in terms of the balance of forces, the geographical position, the demographics, it's not really that viable, but it's being propped up artificially as an expression and an extension of Western hegemony. And it's just, for me as a historian, it's so much like the Crusader states, which were a project of Western colonialism, but it had to be constantly supported with trade and renewal of new crusades being called to mobilize and bring troops, and it lasted about 200 years. So I think that probably is the perspective that you're telling us to think about, is you've got to look at a longer geopolitical and strategic time frame, and Iran believes that it has time, and what it wants to do is buy time, for it to continue its development in a number of arenas. But we've got some other, kinds of questions that have come up, and actually a couple of people have and this isn't something we discussed before, but it seems like an interesting topic. Both Bryn Bran and Resistance is Fertile. Resistance is Fertile. Benji followed up with, what about the Zangezur corridor? And what about we have the later comment that from Bryn Brand, addressed to you. How do you interpret current events between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the U.S.? Could a new war break out in the region? Which is referring as well to this trade agreement and this plan to build this corridor that goes east-west, and may be seen as potentially disrupting the north-south kind of Russia, Armenia, Iran kind of trade and communications kind of network. So what do you think is happening in this new agreement that's being brokered between Azerbaijan and Armenia that, listeners and watchers should all remember have fought, at least two conflicts over, an Armenian majority area that had been part of the Azerbaijani state, and was being contested, and led to at least two kind of military conflicts between Azerbaijan. I mean, a lot of low-level stuff over the years, but this is like a 20-30-year story in the kind of breakup of the Soviet kind of union. There were a lot of these kinds of sort of stranded minority populations that now we're having to deal with new national kind of nationalist nation states, And so what do you think about this kind of U.S. sponsored brokering of a peace deal or a relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
I have to say, wonderful, amazing question. And this is truly a topic that we could spend an entire show on, because it is super complex. And Adnan, just the background that you gave there is critically important. I will speak to this issue and just hope that viewers have a basic understanding of the geography, because the geography kind of matters. And the map that I sent, Iranian territorial losses showing the 19th century loss of Baku and Azerbaijan, would also be relevant. But let me try to unpack this in a way that I can do it relatively quickly and meaningful here in office hours. Excellent. So wonderful. We can see here Treaty of Golistan. I'm mousing over as if people can see my mouse. Not sorry if you want to mouse over, but up in the top left corner of the map that's on the screen, we can see that what is now the Republic of Azerbaijan was Iranian territory up until the Treaty of Golistan in 1813. The perhaps obviously there is a linguistic commonality, not completely. There's different dialects, but linguistic commonality between Iranian Azeri Turks and the population of the Republic of Azerbaijan. So we have some cultural, some linguistic, also of course religious commonality, but of course, as a result of the Soviet experience, the gerrymandering of borders, the creation of new republics within the context of the Soviet Union, with the demise of the Soviet Union, many of these republics received their independence and their borders. And so thus we have the independent Republic of Azerbaijan created, which, to just get through this relatively quickly, immediately began to purge non-Turkish elements within the society. And this led to some really terrible pogroms against the Armenian population, which led to the war between the Republic of Armenia, which also received its independence, and the newly independent Republic of Azerbaijan, which the Armenian Republic won. So the Armenian Republic won that war. And again, I can't really mouse over. But by winning that war, it was able to occupy territory deep within the established legally, let's say, by international law, legally recognized borders of the Republic of Azerbaijan. This territory is known as Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, as Armenians refer to it. This is a region that has been inhabited by Armenian populations for thousands of years. And I'm not saying, even the extent of the Persian Empire, 2,500, 3,000 years, there's like 7,000, 8,000 year old shoes that they have found, some of the earliest wine ever created. So this is a circumstance, say, unlike the claim of the Hebrews that, hey, well, we were here thousands of years ago and then we bailed and now we'd like to come back. There has been a continual Armenian presence in Artsakh for thousands of years. In winning the war against Azerbaijan, Armenia was able to militarily occupy that territory and protect the indigenous Armenians of Artsakh. And yet, international law still called for Armenia to engage in negotiations to solve this problem, because international law recognized the borders of the Azerbaijani Republic as containing and enfolding Artsakh. To just advance then to essentially, the last war, 2021, Armenia neglected to engage in diplomacy with Azerbaijan. And I won't go off on my anecdotal stories, but having conversations with relatives and friends and scholars over the decades and saying, what are we going to do about this? And then basically saying, well, what are the Turks going to do about this? I guess they can cry. So, no interest in doing anything about it, and actually like at least, if not heeding international law, dealing directly with international law to bring about some permanence to the Armenian presence in Artsakh. We also then had on the color revolution, essentially, in my view, that brought President Pashinyan to power in Armenia. In brief, again, because I could go on and on about this, but in my view, Pashinyan was supported and encouraged through this color revolution and his seizure of power to essentially limit the relationship with Russia, to try to cut Russia out of its role in Armenia, to bring Armenia out of the CSTO, to essentially bring Armenia into an American or EU orbit, and eventually potentially a NATO orbit, such as what was tried in Georgia 2007, 2008. Because the Pashinyan administration acted to limit the Russian influence, in my view, this is one of the reasons why Armenia had its hiney, if you will, handed to it in the war against Azerbaijan. This was brutal and this was terrible. This was some of the first uses of attack kamikaze drones, for which the Armenians were completely unprepared. They had artillery ready, like they were going to fight, the war in Artsakh in 1994, some World War II battle, and they were just completely owned in the most horrific way. This led to criticism within Armenia by design, and of course the Armenian diaspora, that, oh God, the Russians sold Armenia out. Look what the Russians did to Armenia, when in fact, in my view, it was Pashinyan's action to limit Russia's presence, its abilities, its influence over the Armenian military, which led potentially by design to this loss, which of course then led to cries within the Pashinyan administration and those increasingly few Armenian civilians that support the administration to just completely get rid of Russia, to kick Russia out, and to try to join the EU if possible, to join NATO if possible, to have a new relationship with the United States if possible. And so that is the context for American maneuver. Samantha Power came in, spent a bunch of money setting up the NGOs, or even more NGOs. One of the largest embassies that the United States maintains on earth is in Armenia. Like, it's shockingly large, and why Armenia is such a small country with such a small population, like Lebanon, needs such a large embassy. It is location, location, location. And so the United States, I'm just going to kind of jump to the chase here. I believe, recognizing that the Ukraine experiment in overextending Russia is going to fail, is continuing this game on its southern flank, and believes that it can, if you will, kill two birds with one stone. If the United States can support Azerbaijan and Turkey in establishing a land route, this Zangezur corridor that would link the independent principality of Nakhchivan with Azerbaijan, thus linking Turkey with Azerbaijan, that somehow a geostrategic ace can be pulled, and the United States can block Iranian and Russian trade and interaction by cutting a corridor straight across southern Armenia, and then begin to work its, neoconservative imperialist magic on both, right? So to surround Iran even more than it's already surrounded, And I'll just mention that it hasn't been confirmed, but apparently drones were flying over from Azerbaijan during the 12-day war. So if that is indeed the case, then this would just further solidify the position of Israel and the United States on Iran's northern border, as you know, they act as at least the United States as security forces to protect the trucking going on this corridor. So, of course, in another perspective, this could be seen as the United States fully supporting the pan-Turan dreams, the neo-Ottoman dreams of Erdogan and those that have, pan-Turan crackpipe dreams. But for a desperate American empire, which has failed in Ukraine, why not? The United States does not care at all about the Armenians. Armenia will be turned into Ukraine, and that is into relative dust in a few days, not a few years. Armenia is a tiny country with one capital. It will be destroyed. But American political elites, American foreign policy drivers, they care nothing about Armenia and Armenians. They care about their broader geostrategic goals. And so this corridor being established, being staffed or manned, defended by American troops is perceived by the Trump administration and by the members of the Biden administration who are advancing it as a way to divide Russia and Iran, to enable Azerbaijan, that is the Republic of Azerbaijan, to be even more of an important component of Israeli-American geostrategy in the region, and in that way to somehow then further accomplish the goals. That is, which path to Persia, the Brookings Institute 2009 policy paper, which essentially we continue to operate, the United States continues to operate directly from that script. And then there was, I'm not sure if it was Cato or Brookings, but overextending Russia, the position paper that essentially the United States has been operating on relative to Ukraine. And so this can just be seen as continuity of agenda although bringing that down further into the Caucasus. I'll just close, and I hope that I was able to answer at least some of the question in that run, but related to the map that we had up on the screen a few minutes ago, I would like to point out that Iran is a country of 92 million people with an increasingly, exponentially stronger internal national identity and nationalism than it even had 2 months ago. And we could talk about that. I don't know about the level of internal Azerbaijani nationalism and national cohesion, but they are a nation of 10 million people. They are a nation of 10 million people that has, by international law, sovereignty over territory that was Iranian territory up until 1813, and then was Russian territory subsequently. I'll just say the more that Azerbaijan engages in this game and takes itself seriously and really believes, and again, I'm not in Aliyev's head, I don't know what they're thinking, but really believes that they can be the component in the region to divide Russia and the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think he should think about what it would be like if Iran and or Russia just decided to split the pie and just maybe figure out who gets the gas station in Baku, because a very small country relative to a very large country, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and a very large and powerful country of Russia. And the idea that Russia and Iran are going to allow this is absurd. And Iranian political elites have already very strongly spoken to this issue. Russia is doing its I think more traditional Putin-style fence-sitting and slow game, but I'm also sure that Russia will not tolerate this. So in a nutshell, we are witnessing the continuation of neoconservative geostrategic games, and should this game continue, we could be looking forward to the destruction of Armenia and then likely the destruction of Azerbaijan, and potentially the enfolding into either their traditional position within a larger Iran or a larger Russia.
Yes, well, very interesting. But don't forget the other possible benefit is that this will burnish Trump's case for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, indeed.
Brokering this, this internecine conflict has been
Yes.
going on, but I have managed to solve it in the blink of an eye, right? So
Yes.
this is
Thank
the
you for
other.
your attention to this matter. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But I think one other thing that I think is interesting about this situation is also just to think a little bit about um, the way in which sometimes a certain kind of identity or sectarian frame for history and explanation just really falls apart when you look carefully at the actual history from the material kind of conditions and what's going on. I mean, Azerbaijan, although there might be some ethnic and linguistic differences, distributed across. I mean, there's a lot of connection with people in Iran who are also Turkic language speakers. But interestingly and importantly, the Azeris, they're all Shia. Okay, so is Iran. But nonetheless, what has been the biggest sort of problem on its border, after the Iran-Iraq war has been basically Azerbaijani kind of interference. I mean, we still don't know if um, they were involved. You mentioned the 12-day war, but even before that, of course, with the accident,
Yes.
helicopter accident, but might have been he was coming back from Azerbaijan. I mean, this is a tense relationship, and they have been very pro, obviously close allies with Turkey, which is a NATO power, but also very pro Israel, right? In all of this. And of course, Israel receives a lot of its energy resources from Azerbaijani exports of natural gas and so on. Whereas the Armenians, are Christians. And they have been close allies with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So you can't just take a sectarian religious framework to talk about, the Shia crescent, and so the real division is the Sunni Shia. That's a sectarian game that is a colonial kind of Western imperial approach that unfortunately many people in the region have themselves used and exploited in just the same way that like sectarian identity between Sunni and Shia did not really mean very much in Saddam Hussein's Iraq and in the previous Ba'athist era of Iraq. And since the 1950s on, there was a kind of secular state that was an Arab nationalist sort of regime. And people's religious affiliation and identity was not politically salient and significant, but it did become so in the sectarianization of politics after the US invasion. And of course, it was also preceded by the stoking and promoting of and encouraging of Saddam Hussein's Iraq to invade Iran, that they started sectarianizing, Iraqi identity increasingly. And so these are not just static givens in history that, because they are Shia or because they are Sunni. That actually isn't very explanatory. And I think this was a really nice example for exposing the way in which the geostrategic situation is actually so much more important and revealing, and that there are some changes that in our analysis if we pay attention to what's really going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add one point, because there was a interesting interview with the deputy Armenian foreign minister 2 days ago to Press TV, the Iranian English language channel, and he was being pressed on this question of like, what the hell are you guys doing, and what can we expect from this? And just for the record, his explanation was, we're well aware of the games, we know exactly what's going on. Americans aren't going to be running this thing. Armenians are going to have full sovereignty over it. The idea that Russia and Iran aren't going to be able to crisscross the road is like, don't even worry about it. Like, we got this. So just for the record, I just wanted to add that with that, also the Armenian deputy foreign minister was saying, and we've got the best relationship with the Islamic Republic. We go back with Iran, all this, so just loading it on, right? That doesn't necessarily, allay my concerns or anyone else's, but I just sort of, for the record, that is currently the Pashinyan administration's narrative that, that we got this, it's fine, it's just going to be a road, and who doesn't like roads? And so, of course, that could be expected from the administration that penned this deal, and just Pashinyan. Some of the clips from DC are really just depressing and disgusting to watch. I think he was punked and shamed, to use colloquial terminology.
Right.
But anyway, so.
Well, you see, Morrow posted, strangely, Pashinyan did not even demand release of the Armenian bishops held by Azerbaijan as part of the Zanzigur proposal. So, it's definitely happening a little bit under duress and under pressure, and it is part of this, as you have already explained, a kind of pro-West color revolution style kind of government. So that's interest. But, part of the original question had also been, is this going to lead to war and conflict? And I think implicit in your answer is that definitely there will there will be reasons for increased tensions as a result of this with Iran and with Russia. But I think what it also, this kind of question suggests that the other kind of possible source for war breaking out, which is after the 12-day war, is another attack imminent. And I don't know if this particular development of a diplomatic overture and trying to pull Armenia into more of a U.S. Turkey-Azerbaijani kind of axis against Russia and Iran may contribute to it. But I think this is something that definitely there's been a lot of talk about recently, that there could be an attack as soon as the end of August, that Trita Parsi in foreign policy hedging his bets, saying there will be one by the end of December, if not August 30th, right? So he's kind of given himself two timelines there. But the point is that a lot of people have been saying, there was even talk, of course, during the high point of the, Epstein kind of scandal and the pressure that was turning far-right MAGA against the Trump administration for its failure to reveal the dossiers and the evidence and the so-called list and so forth, that there might be some, of the typical gambit of U.S. presidents when under political pressure, solving and resolving that problem by, bombing brown people somewhere as like a reliable way to distract, the nation and have people rally around the flag. I don't think I took that too seriously, but the point is that the end of the U.S. Iranian attacks on Iran in the last month in June, and now seems like ancient history, so much is always happening, that there has been since that time talks about whether this would be a stable truce or a cessation of hostilities. Would there be, what kind of a timeline? And so I thought it would be, valuable to have your take, because in fact, I think you have a rather different view than some of these commentators who are expecting or suggesting that there could be a reopening of direct military conflict between Israel, possibly even the U.S. And there are different, perspectives on whether the U.S. would get kind of more fully and directly involved, as they did to some extent before. But I'm wondering your thoughts about this kind of question about the possible imminent attack on Iran.
Here too, I have a very, I think, different take than many of my colleagues and fellow commentators and talking heads, such as Trita Parsi. I have a lot of respect for, and always, whatever Trita writes, I will consider and read. And since it's office hours, folks, I'm going to tell just a brief anecdote, which relates to why up until June 21st, 2025, I had sworn off making any predictions related to West Asia or Middle Eastern politics. But I on June 21st kind of went on record breaking from that, and I have made predictions, and I'll let you know my predictions. But let's just go back to July 28th, 1990. I am about to enter into UC Berkeley. We're going to be starting in about a month. I have graduated from UC Santa Cruz studying with Edmund Burke. I'm going to be studying Middle Eastern and Islamic history with Ira Lapidus. And so clearly I know my shit, right? Because I'm going to go to grad school in a month. So I'm at Juan's Place, which is an excellent Mexican restaurant in Berkeley, kind of near the water, with my friends Matt and Joel. And my friend Joel asked me something I had no idea of. We didn't have the internet, so I wasn't paying attention to this news at the time. Dave, did you hear Saddam has massed troops on the Kuwaiti border and he's going to invade? What's the deal, man? And I was like, dude, Saddam is not going to invade Kuwait. Think about it. His primary client is or patron is the Soviet Union. They're falling apart. I mean, he would get kicked out of there. There would be a coalition, regionally, internationally. They would kick him out of there. There's no way he's going to do that. So don't worry, Joel. David Yagubian is telling you that that's not going to happen. So August 2nd, 1990 was the day that I decided that I would never make more predictions or future predictions regarding what would happen within West Asia, because I was so completely wrong about that. I mean, I was right that what ended up happening to Iraq and that the 19th province of Iraq was not going to be, enfolded into Iraq, and that a coalition would be created. Great. So that approach has worked out very well for me. So anyway, with that, I just essentially would not make predictions, or if I did, I would provide all kinds of caveats, kind of like Trita Parsi did in his article. Because if you read Trita's article, even a couple of commentators who I read their reviews of the article were like, wow, very carefully worded. He leaves himself a lot of outs, basically. But we're right on Trita. Here's the deal, folks. June 21st, after Trump's speech, his post, obliteration of Iran's nuclear program speech, and then the subsequent speech by Benjamin Netanyahu, considering every one of their words as well as their tone, their facial expressions, I sort of made the prediction, and I have stuck with it, that this is it. There will not be another Israeli or an American attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, does that mean, or was I arguing that there would not be hybrid warfare, that there would not be terrorist attacks, that there would not be some sort of attacks or pressure placed that have plausible deniability for Israel, the United States? No, absolutely not. But the idea that Israel and or the United States are going to start it up again, that at the end of August, because of the snapback provisions, that Netanyahu is just going to start up the war again, I am arguing strongly against this, that this is not in the cards. This is not going to happen. This has to do with three moving points of analysis on, if you will, a shifting game board or playing field. And that is Iranian strength and soft power and hard power relative to American strength, soft power, hard power, relative to Zionist strength, soft power, and hard power, and the internal political dynamics within all three. I could explain what I mean by all of those, but I will just say that based on my analysis of those three dynamic points, there is no way that Israel is going to launch another attack on Iran, because Israel will be unable to bring the Trump administration into another war on Iran, because the Trump administration completely obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Why would they do that? And hence Arakchi coming out and saying, yeah, they obliterated our nuclear program. It's just gone.
Right. Nothing to see here now. Just
move along, folks. So I have heard some sort of fellow talking heads analysts verging closer to my argument, such as Alistair Crook the other day, after arguing with the judge for about 15 minutes that, yeah, there's going to be another attack, basically concluded by saying, yeah, but Iran's too strong and Israel's too weak and it's all falling apart there. Trump's got a complete, pardon my French, it's office hours shit show going on. Domestically, in every single initiative that he's tried to put forward on everything. Therefore, even Crook had to pretty much conclude that it's not going to be happening soon. But I also believe that many talking heads and YouTube shows that do generate views based on headlines like, will Israel attack again tomorrow? They need to kind of sustain this dialogue. And I hate to be like a hater or a party pooper, but I'm sorry, I just haven't humored it from the very first day. I've been on record with a few folks, including Adnan and Sina and some other folks, just to kind of let it be known that I'm calling BS on this from the very last word of Netanyahu's speech, which followed Trump's. It's not going to happen. It is just not going to happen. And again, I'd be happy to elaborate on my prediction that I am making this prediction. And hell, I could be wrong. You know, I'll eat a Karbala prayer stone if I'm wrong, but without dipping it in water too. But I don't think I am. I'm confident as an Iranian and as a scholar and as a historian and as a human being that this is not going to happen again.
Well, we may get into, you know, especially if people raise some of the reasons why they think it might happen. And I do have to say that the one, and somebody echoed exactly a thought that I had. Let's see, Bog. I-708, never underestimate the stupidity of the Zionists. Now, I wouldn't put it that way, although it is interesting because usually they're sort of characterized as these like really, you know, next level, strategic, proactive, constantly, oh, look at the pager attack, how, you know, remarkable. And, you know, like they're often given exaggerated credit for, you know, sophisticated and clever, you know, games and assassination, you know, and so on. But in fact, actually, what I would say is don't underestimate the fascistic, messianic kind of logics of those who are running this greater Israel sort of policy and project, and the fact that somebody like Netanyahu is clearly committed to now a policy of endless war, especially if he can get and continue to get the impunity, the support, the military resources provided by the collective West, that, you know, then you know, he's willing to kind of ratchet up and make things that might seem to be geostrategic mistakes, but they're actually useful in perpetuating the process of warfare as its own end and its own goal in transforming Israeli society and the state into an ultra-fascistic, you know, kind of warrior state. You know, it's like the Spartan, you know, pure Spartans sort of state. And so there are some logics that don't follow into what we would consider the rational calculus of geopolitical strategy, of economic, capacity, of demographic reality. Like there are ways in which there is an irrational ideological kind of commitment to you know, Jewish supremacy and a vision of greater Israel, and so on. So that's, I think, one way that you have to think that perhaps these are dangerous people who are willing to do things like put themselves in a kind of a genuinely existential threat situation. They've been claiming that it's an existential threat in order to prevent and avoid having to actually make an honest kind of peace arrangement based on mutual, you know, respect, on, you know, dignity for the other, on, you know, the humanity of the other, to follow, you know, international law or any of those things. So they've constantly been, you know, portraying it as we're dealing with terrorists, you can't negotiate with them, it's an existential threat, in order to avoid dealing with that reality. But I think the same logic applies that they do have the Samson option. They are, you know, willing to take everybody else down with them. I think the United States is potentially in that, something we were going to maybe talk about later on when we get into a really interesting question about the decline of the United States and what the consequences of that are, and how should the rest of the world manage this dangerous, violent, you know, kind of a society and culture that is used to being hegemonic and has built its identity around the privilege of being the, kind of rulers of the world. And when they recognize and realize that's just not possible anymore, how do they respond and react to that? And it can be very violent, very dangerous for the rest of the world. So that's the only element that I think we have to also factor in, because I agree with you that the conditions are not, these are not good prospects, really. Some of it does maybe rely a little bit on what people think happened in the 12-day war. And there's been so much attempt at obfuscating to preserve the image and the impenetrability and the military dominance of Israel. And so there hasn't been as fully an accounting of that in, say, the Western press and media to say, that actually Iran caused all this kind of damage and it would be very risky for them to enter again. And that perhaps the end of the 12-day war was really, the US being pulled in to kind of save Israel from itself. And there's a sense, and I've even seen some reports that there are, members of that kind of military council of, not necessarily the ones who are active in the roles, but former heads of the Shin Bet and former generals of the IDF and all that are this kind of like resource for counsel and advice for Israeli military, and foreign policy, have been making overtures, desperate pleas, to the Trump administration officials that, hey, you got to get us out of this situation. We can't take so much of more and expanding war and opening new fronts again and all of that. And so, that kind of suggests that at least the rational calculus community within the Zionist project may have qualms, may want to put restraints, but they're not the only ones that are, operating here. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about that kind of the rational versus the irrational, as it were, in geopolitics. In this
Certainly,
case.
I'd say in the context of Israel, the rational and the irrational are sort of like what I was describing within Iran. It's kind of built in. I mean, just in a nutshell, it's all of the, oh God, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, Netanyahu, they're just crazy, they're fascists, and yet they're still fully supported generally by this society, which over 80% of Zionists, at least by the poll that came out, support the genocide and perhaps think that it should be, they should be even tougher on the Palestinians. So I just want to say that there was a comment that came up about Chaz Freeman coming around, and so I really look forward to hearing what he has to say. I watch everything that Chaz does. I'm a huge fan. I don't always agree with everything that he says, but just like with whatever Jeff Sachs or Mearsheimer, but I deeply appreciate his commentary, and it's encouraging to hear that Chaz has argued this. So I can't wait to hear that. I also just want to say, to the point that, never underestimate the stupidity of Zionists or say the desperation or insanity of Benjamin Netanyahu. Yes, of course. But related to Adnan's excellent points that he made just now, the Israeli security establishment, if you will, is well aware of what actually happened, what went down, what didn't go down, what was damaged and destroyed, what wasn't, how many missiles came in, how many interceptors intercepted, etc. And so I will at least just hedge on my prediction in this way. Sure, Netanyahu could potentially order another kinetic attack, direct overt on Iran. By the way, I'm not even going to humor that, because that would necessitate the Israeli military and Air Force saying, yeah, okay, we'll do this. But let's just say that happens because Netanyahu's main goal is to suck the United States in. And if we bomb them, then they're going to unleash a storm of missiles. And then, oh my God, they're killing all of the Jews. And so the United States will have to rush to the rescue of Israel. That's not going to happen. And I think they know that that's not going to happen. I think that the Trump administration, whatever elements of it have let Israel know, and they let them know by essentially ending the war with Iran with this wag the dog pre-scripted attack on the Al Udeid base, that this is it, we're done, and we just won, we beat Iran, we obliterated their nuclear program, go back to your corner, we're done with this. So I just don't see it. Even considering Zionist stupidity and the evil of Bibi, it's not going to happen. Reality dictates that it's not going to happen. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And my blood pressure ever since June 21st has just like dropped just precipitously. And yeah, nothing that I have seen or heard since that moment when Netanyahu stopped speaking has changed my interpretation of what's actually going on here. So,
okay, well, we will have to see. I mean, I think Benji is pointing out that, you gave a very good rational case for why it didn't make sense for Saddam to
absolutely
invade.
no. By the way, yes, absolutely. You are resistance is fertile. That is like 100%. It's the same thing because this would make no sense. But I will just say that it would necessitate Trump coming out to the American public and his MAGA base and saying, you know what? I lied. We didn't obliterate their program. We didn't destroy them. They're very powerful. And we now have to unleash the American way of war on them, which is begun with essentially days, if not weeks, of anti-radar, anti-aircraft, the softening of infrastructure, like massive American air power and air assets brought to the region, scouring the country for any identifiable target before any next step is taken. That's not happening. The material costs of that, the social costs of that here in the United States with everything that is going on within MAGA America right now. I'm sorry, again, it's just not going to happen. I can't see it. How could Trump come out and go, you know what? We lied. We didn't obliterate it. Bibi's right. We're just going to go to war with Iran now for a second time. Never mind what I said a couple of months ago. I just can't see it. It's not going to happen in my view.
Okay.
If it does, it does. Iran is ready to pummel the Zionists again, but I don't think they're going to have to. But you're right. You are right on 100% with that comment. So,
well, Benji follows up with saying, we could just say, he could just say, we have to protect our precious Zionist colony. But you know what? I don't think that's a very as effective. Like, you're seeing that, the charges of Israel first, the kind of critique that we've seen, these pious statements that these politicians, always used to make and are still making of, talking about the, unique alliance between U.S. and Israel and all this. It's not resonating in quite the same way, it seems to me, particularly there on the right, where there are kind of qualms around this. And, let's just say it, like, this kind of conspiratorial, and there's a good, I think, in fact, actually, I think there is going to be quite a lot of anti-Semitism that will come out in the response when MAGA finally, decides, oh my God, this was terrible. If Trump gets, because I think actually, if there is another round soon, how is there going to be deterrence? I mean, unless the United States is going to start committing troops to this.
Yeah. And Adnan, let me just add, I got to add, if anybody saw Nick Fuentes, whatever you think about the guy, to Adnan's point about rise of anti-Semitism, and I'm not even saying that his statements were anti-Semitic because they were in context, but he is going hard. And I won't repeat on Adnan's podcast now in this office hours the words that he used, but it was basically dropping some extreme F-bombs and directing this to the Trump administration and to those Israel firsters in the American government. And it was relatively extreme. And he ultimately directed it at Jews. He wasn't saying all Jews. He was saying, though, these people who are supportive of this, who are Jewish, why can't we call them out for that as well? I'm not advancing that argument. I'm not condoning the argument. What I'm saying is the gray area that you just referenced, that this is going to verge into anti-Semitism and eventually might just fully be exposed or sort of meld into genuine anti-Semitic generalizations. Like, I think we're at that cusp. There is this like MTG, Nick Fuentes, MAGA base that is seriously pissed off about this, and they're not going away. One more thing. I heard yesterday a few of the town hall meetings that Republican representatives have been having, and they were getting blasted. I mean, completely chanted down by their audience related to this issue of support for Israel. I mean, powerfully. I wish I could remember who the representatives were, but these are like stock APAC favorites who could not get a word in edgewise in their town meetings because Republican Americans are apoplectic and beside themselves. And one woman even stood up and said directly, "You are clearly out of sync with the American people and Republicans, and so you should be replaced." And everybody cheered. So this is the context in which Donald Trump is going to have a second successful obliteration of Iran. I just don't see it. So
yeah, I mean, what it brings up is so many kind of interesting components and dimensions of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And I noticed that there's been that question has come up in the chat in a variety of ways. I've been noticing also on Twitter that many people who have said, well, Runia Dunmarky, who's a big Yemen person and is always tweeting about what's happening in Yemen and Ansar Allah's positions and so on, and who's been a guest on Guerrilla History about the history of Yemen. And I do just want to say I just put out an episode of my discussion, but really is just mining the incredibly deep expertise of Professor Issa Bloomy from Stockholm University about Yemen in two parts. And the first half of that episode is out. I really encourage people to go learn more about Yemen's history to try and understand where does Ansar Allah come out of. But my point here is just that, even some real anti-imperialist kind of analysts and commentators who typically saw and thought of the U.S.-Israel relationship as the aircraft carrier in the Middle East, as that, that really this is, fitting within the priorities and geostrategic interests of U.S. imperial dominance in the region, versus those who, characterized the Israel lobby as deforming, this is the Mearsheimer and Walt kind of approach, that in fact, actually the problem here is that somehow U.S. political elites and U.S. Political priorities have been somehow perverted from, genuine U.S. interests to, excessive support of Israel, no matter what it does. And, so how people saw this relationship dictated a lot of how they saw the horizons for what kind of political action was necessary, and what their larger analysis was that touched upon this question of distinguishing between, Israel and, diasporic Jews and Judaism, and so this is kind of really a very serious and important kind of question analytically to think about. And part of the way I would go about considering it is that I don't really anymore see, and this is something I mentioned in the first office hours when I was talking with Aaron Good, we're talking about this issue because it just keeps coming up as like the real quandary, like how do we make sense of this? That I just now at this point don't see a real difference between the kind of elite Zio-American kind of elite consensus, right? Like it doesn't make that much sense to distinguish, oh, this is Israel and this is like US. I mean, what's happened is that over the last 15, 20 years with the tech billionaires who are like very Zionist oriented, and the US and the relationship, that Anthony Lowenstein talks about in terms of the Palestine laboratory, that, Israel's economy, its society is like a mirror image in crystalline, smaller microcrystalline form of what is increasingly the direction of the U.S. society. And Netanyahu even says it, is that you have become more like us, right? This is what's happened, is that the entire West is ditching, kind of its masks, of liberal international order, the rules-based order, liberal institutions. They're willing to destroy and just, and absolutely completely undermine their university institutions, their legal regimes, political rights, freedom of speech, all these things that used to be the cornerstones of how, Western self-identity as liberal democracies was constructed, that is going by the wayside with this onslaught of fascistic, anti-immigrant racism. It's like we're back in the late 19th century with like colonial sorts of language is like commonplace at the highest level with somebody like Trump and so on. And so what it means to me is that it doesn't really make sense to just think about it as separate parts, but as a more systematic set of interlocking and overlapping networks.
Absolutely.
That prevent real democratic control in both these locations, because there's a kind of corporate pro-Zionist elite that just crosses these boundaries themselves so easily. And the other layer to it is, of course, also the extreme radical Christian Zionism. That is the largest community of really, very dedicated Zionist-oriented support in their messianic and apocalyptic sorts of expectations and commitments. And that's mirrored, of course, by the group and the community that has become predominant, or even if not predominant, but at least holding the balance of power, and therefore exercising an exaggerated kind of irrational logic of Jewish supremacy in a messianic kind of frame that is very much like these evangelical Christian Zionists. Just they're different, components, but they act in sort of similar ways. And as a result, they can collaborate on this kind of really death cult of, we will take it to the extreme. So I don't know. I just went on a big long rant.
No, if I can run with that really quickly, because just stemming directly from what you were your words, and to consider Sasha's excellent question.
Yes.
Because I think that this relates, and so just in light of what you just said and this question, let me just try to address this. So certainly, and in my view, what about the evil of Trump? Trump can be considered stupid and evil as well. I think that American evangelical Christian end times doctrine philosophy is also pretty evil in my view anyway. So the support of people like Reverend Hagee and Kufi for Trump is predicated on Trump being the most pro-Zionist, pro-Jewish, if you want to call it that, although that I believe is anti-Semitic to say that, pro-Zionist, pro-Israel president that the United States has ever seen. So they will support Trump as long as he is supporting Israel, and they consider Trump destroying Iran as part of the demonstration of that support for Israel. So Trump has a domestic base which would be completely supportive of his evil maneuvers to bomb and destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran, killing civilians, bombing nuclear sites, creating environmental disaster, etc. Now, so he's got the base to support that. I believe he's got a huge evangelical base. I've seen between 40 million and 70 million American evangelical Christians. I'm not sure, but let's go with the 40 million number. Now, let's consider Trump in that context. As I hope most viewers saw, Trump and the Trump administration engaged in bogus diplomacy with the Islamic Republic of Iran for well over a month, until ultimately Israel engaged in its dastardly, underhanded blitzkrieg, sucker punch attack, at which point Donald Trump basically was like, hey, yeah, we're doing great. This is us. We did it. Like Trump being fully willing to take on the responsibility, and victory has 1,000 fathers, right? He was going to be another father of this amazing victory in the overthrow of the Islamic Republic. Okay, 12 hours later, when Iran got its act together and started pummeling Israel, we saw that rhetoric diminishing until ultimately Trump coming out, let's fast forward to when he dropped the F-bomb on the lawn. These two countries just can't get along and they don't know what they're doing, right? I said that without the F-bomb. Here's my point in running through that, folks. Donald Trump is an opportunist, okay? He's the ultimate opportunist. If he could have a free victory over Iran and, not get a Nobel Peace Prize, but get a brownie point for I destroyed the Islamic Republic of Iran. All these other presidents tried to do it, but they couldn't do it, but Donald Trump did it. He will take that. Now, that didn't work out. okay, we're still going to assume the evil and the stupidity of Donald Trump. But just briefly, I want to remind viewers of the most expensive war game that the United States ever paid for, which was in 2002, Millennium Challenge 2002, which cost $250 million. And in short, Iran killed 20,000 Americans within the first 5 hours, and multiple American aircraft carriers and major cruisers were sunk with Americans, dying in these floating coffins, right? Here's my point in mentioning that. Donald Trump, I believe, is aware that if an actual war emerges between Iran and the United States, and the United States engages in its true style of warfare, which is, as I said, you're going to soften up targets and you're going to engage in aerial warfare, creating a true no-fly zone, which Israel actually never did. Actually, it was claimed they created air supremacy. They did not. But the United States would, by doctrine, by necessity, create a complete air superiority, which would take weeks, at which point we would already be in the numbers of thousands, if not tens of thousands of American dead. This is a fact, folks. This is not something that I'm guessing about. This is a fact. Iran's old missiles, the crappy missiles that it has down in the Persian Gulf, those would be the ones that would be used to decimate the American bases in the region. And so my point, again, yes, Donald Trump is evil, and Donald Trump is in the driver's seat. It's not Netanyahu. I will agree with that. But Donald Trump is not going to agree to be the overseer of potentially tens of thousands of American dead. He doesn't care about the Iranians, but also a potential loss in a war to the Islamic Republic of Iran. Ergo, therefore, folks, it's over. Trump came out and proclaimed it. This was the speech that led to my prediction. The way he said it, the words he said it, it's done. It's over. We did it. We're done. Not a single Iranian or American had to die in Millennium Challenge 2025. And we're just so freaking awesome. Go team, epic winning. So in short, yeah, Trump's evil, Trump's stupid, so is Netanyahu. Iran gets a vote, the IRGC gets a vote, Shahab missiles get a vote, and that vote, in my view, equals there will not be a war between Iran and the United States. I mean, in the next few decades and under this configuration, not going to happen, folks. Again, prepared to be wrong, but I'm not.
Okay, excellent. I love it. I just want to remind everybody, what are you doing not liking this stream? Have you liked the stream? Like the stream. Okay, share the video. Who's talking this stuff? Like, you got to share it. Don't be parsimonious and miserly with like the real knowledge. Hey, we're here. We're excited to talk with you. We've got this wonderful expert and scholar of Iran. We're going to have some more questions and discussion with him. But hey, like this video, share the stream, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future editions of Office Hours, because we're going to be doing it, if I can, weekly. I'll let you know if I can't do it in a particular week because I'm traveling or something's going on. But my commitment is we got to be having these discussions. We've got to build some community. We have to have this kind of education. Then we got to go out and do things with this knowledge. And I just want to say it's great to see so many wonderful comments, queries, perspectives, challenging points. I love that. We want to have good discussion. Give the counterpoint, bring the evidence, make the arguments. Let's get this going so that we sharpen our analysis, so that we understand what's going on better, that we make each other think through these things in more clear terms, so that then we're not going to be confused by the misinformation, the propaganda, the sort of attempts to try and reframe this in order for us not to recognize, what's really going on in the reality. So it's great to see all these wonderful comments. And I also have to say, we have some great people, other people who I hope will become guests actually on Office Hours in the future. Friend and colleague David Schmid was in the house. Brandon Wolf Honeycutt is maybe still in the house, but he was there before. He posted that, Dave, your class changed his life. He was an undergrad in your course, and definitely he's now a great Middle East historian in his own right, and you should all go check out. It was recently remastered and released on Guerrilla History on our feed, our interview with me and Henry Hakamaki with Brandon Wolf Honeycutt about his fantastic book about Iraq and the U.S. relationship to Iraq and the oil industry. Had a great title, and now I'm blanking on it, but it's The Paranoid Style of American Diplomacy, I think was the name of the book, and it's absolutely fascinating and fantastic. And of course, we have the Resistance is Fertile crew, not only Benji Schoendorf, but also Sasha Rambut's, whose question you were just and points you were just dealing. It's great to see people coming in. Let's continue the discussion. But I want to turn to, but don't forget to like the stream, people, and make sure that it's out there. Okay, now we haven't even got to some of the things that we were supposed to be high on the agenda to talk about. And I don't even know, should we even, Bob, we're historians, so of course we're so fascinated by going back, what is the momentous kind of turn for the region, really, not just Iran, but for the region of the Iranian Revolution. And maybe if people are interested, we'll come back to that, because there's been a new book by a journalist arguing that it's, could have been accidental. I guess the book is called, what is the book called? It's called King of Kings.
Yeah. A story of hubris, delusion and catastrophe. Hubris, delusion, catastrophe, and miscalculation. Number one bestseller on the New York Times, and everyone from Axios and Vox and all of the New York Times and the Washington Post, they love it. So
yes, the New York. The Atlantic had that Arash Azizi piece that you told me about. There was in the New Yorker, Daniel Immerwahr, who kind of has the public profile of being a kind of lefty historian, who wrote this book about how to hide an empire, about the U.S. is sort of imperial, but it was not really an open empire. These were kind of very serious people in very serious, organs of, public intellectual culture, really praising this book by a journalist, Scott Anderson, that essentially argues that, kind of was an accident,
Khomeini got lucky.
It was kind of unlucky. U.S. got unlucky. Middle East got, unlucky that, this revolution happened. I don't know how much, is at stake for other people in it, but, so that we don't go down the rabbit hole of really, discussing what happened in the revolution. And maybe sometime we should have a good episode about that. I think what's more kind of salient is what's going on here with this incredible approbation. Why is a book like this coming out and now being hailed, so that everybody has to kind of come across the fact that this enemy state that, everyone's wondering, are we about to have an imminent attack, and is the U.S. going to be in war with Iran? That the regime, that is governing governing Iran, isn't actually deeply rooted in a historical social transformation that happened in the late 1970s, but is, kind of an accident of various circumstances, could have been avoided, didn't have to happen. So why are they all talking about this now?
Interestingly, the Immerwahr article and the Azizi article were one day apart, right? You had August 4th. I forgot which, August 4th, Azizi, I believe August 5th, Immerwahr, in the Atlantic and the New Yorker, right? So very, I think, similar types of organs, if you will. Whereas the Azizi piece, I think they're very different pieces, actually. Azizi, I can paraphrase it. Everyone knows the Islamic Republic is terrible and that all Iranians hate the Islamic Republic. So how can we explain this revolution. Oh, the Carter administration messed up. And this journalist, who isn't bound with all the history and the theory and all these frameworks, he's able to interview a bunch of non-Iranians who actually weren't even involved in the negotiations at the time. That's been ascertained by fellow colleagues of mine, and found out really the true score. And that's that Khomeini got lucky. The Carter administration messed up. And now we've got this Islamic Republic. So, it's really not a like legitimate or deeply rooted movement or government. Imawar takes a much more, I believe, I mean, he's on much more solid ground, and he approaches it from more of, if you will, a scholarly sort of approach, because Azizi says, this guy's not a scholar, and that's good. So his review is basically anti-intellectual, but Imawar tries to I think be neutral and say, hey, gee, what's the deal with this book? And it's kind of arguing, in between whatever Tolstoy and Hegel, right? That is it a great man thing, or is this sort of like something that is a long a process over the longue durée, right? To your question though, Adnan, which I think is because we could parse both articles and what they have to say about the validity of the argument. And I think Imawar is more neutral, right? He's sort of concluding that gee, well, I guess this is a perspective that can be viably taken. Why does he say that? Because he's a historian who has in many ways tried to do these like history light, LITE, like revisions, like his book, How to Hide an Empire. Like, for the uninitiated, you might not know about American imperialism, but here I'm going to tell you all about it in this one volume. So irrespective of say Imawar's agenda or Azizi's agenda, and I know what Azizi's agenda is, he's literally the guy that wrote the book What Iranians Want: Women, Life, Freedom. So that's him. But it's the timing. And based on the timing, I would just say, and I'll go ahead and put on my tinfoil cap for this if people are going to hear that from my see that basically from my words. But there is a deeply rooted and extremely well-funded global machine that is dedicated to the overthrow of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'm not saying it's a single machine with a single director and a single on-off button, but it is a globally diffused network, most powerful here in the United States and in the Beltway and through the NGOs and the think tanks, and the publication of such articles. It's a constant stream. And I, over the years, especially through a listserv that I've been on since the year 2000 called Gulf 2000, I've even paid attention to the pacing, the spacing, the rapidity of certain articles. And again, I'm not trying to argue that there's some puppeteer that's like, okay, Danny, you write that article now, Arash, you write that one, and then we'll send it to it's not that, but there is a fascinating conjunction of events on the ground, geopolitical developments, and the release of such articles and books. And so let's consider, the book by Scott Anderson obviously was in the works for a few years. So this wasn't like whipped out just because of the failure of the 12-day war, but it's part of an industry of delegitimating the Islamic Republic of Iran and trying to dumb people down and BS them and get them to read things that are essentially several hundred pages of, I guess Khomeini got lucky, rather than someone reading, say, Saeed Arjaman's The Turban for the Crown, which is an in-depth, complex analysis of the rise of, if you will, political Islam or an Islamic revolutionary ideal developed in the 60s and 70s that was ultimately propelled forward by Khomeini, but on the backs of folks like Jalal al-Ahmad, like Ali Shariati, right? That this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. This isn't just like, oh, well, there's this guy Khomeini. God, where'd he come from?
Well, that reminds me that we do have to, at least give a nod and a tip of the hat to one kind of major piece of evidence that falsifies this narrative of like, oh, it's really couldn't have been predicted because it was so, coincidental and not related to any larger social movements and kind of assemblage of power, being contested, and everything would have been fine, but there was this editorial that, angered Khomeini, and somehow he managed to topple the Shah, like it was all just an unhappy accident, is the fact that one of our mentors, and we already mentioned that we studied with him at UC Berkeley, Hamid Algar from the Near Eastern Studies Department at UC Berkeley, another absolutely incredible erudite scholar who knew Arabic, Turkish, Ottoman Turkish, French, German, obviously, even knew Russian, but obviously Farsi might have been maybe his like most kind of serious language. And he translated many, many texts, whether they're kind of sophisticated, poetic, Sufi, mystical
The
treatises.
Constitution of the IRI as well. Yes.
To the Constitution of the Islamic Republic, Khomeini's speeches, Ali Shariati's lectures on the sociology of Islam. So this is somebody who knew the modern intellectual culture of Pahlavi Iran, like nobody. And he wrote, of course, the famous article in the Nikki Keddie collection. What's the title of the collection again?
The collection is Scholars, Saints, and Sufis.
Scholars, Saints, and Sufis. And Hamid Algar wrote, an article there about the ulama, the Muslim clerical, Shi'i clerical elite, and basically said that he expected that there would be the overthrow of the Shah's regime in a revolution, a social revolution led by the Shia scholars, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that was written in 68, published in 71 in this collection years before. So written a decade before, published and available publicly, many years before the actual revolution takes place. So if somebody like that, who actually understands and understood Iranian society could see the mobilizing of discontent crystallizing around not only left kind of dissident social and political movements, but somehow also, being carried forward by a religious language and vocabulary and the structures of authority and respect of communities that looked to leadership in their society in the form of these religious scholars who had themselves started to take much more of an interest in social and political questions, in criticizing the horrible, oppressive, elitist, country under, the westernizing Shah of Iran, the Pahlavi Shah of Iran. It clearly shows that those were observable trends, observable political forces, and that it wasn't an accident, and you can't just simply be reversed because it was just an accident. So you could just topple it and nobody would really be committed to the ideology of the revolution or what it has created.
Brilliantly summarized. And I'll just say again, so the article, folks, if you want to read it, it's called The Oppositional Role of the Ulama in 20th Century Iran. And it is so strikingly different than this very ahistorical approach of Scott Anderson and Arash Azizi, who loved his book, because what Algar does is goes back into, and it goes before the 20th century. He goes back essentially 1872 De Ruyter concession, the 1890 to 92 Iranian tobacco revolt, in which the ulama played an instrumental role in guiding the revolt. How that coalition of the tobacco revolt basically being a dress rehearsal for the constitutional revolution of 1905 to 1911, at which point the ulama's role in political leadership within Iran is established. So the idea that, who are these clerics and there's this Khomeini guy come from, and why would anybody like or listen to him? What Algar is describing is the participation in the leadership of the Iranian Shia ulama, the scholars, for essentially a century, from the 1872 De Ruyter concession until when he is writing, which this piece was originally written in 1968. I believe he gave a conference paper. It was published independently. Then Keddie put it into her volume, which was published in 71. So he then, of course, brings it up to 63, that Khomeini. He's naming him. He basically says, folks, in summary, Khomeini is out there. He's following a tradition of the ulama that goes back decades. He's pissed. He's coming. He's going to overthrow this Shah. He said it in 1968. He was right. And I will say, to the credit of many subsequent historians, Algar is in the historical record. Many of the books written about the revolution after the revolution had to grapple with the fact that most Western scholarship written in the 70s had no clue. The books by Marvin Zonis, James Bill, they're a joke. They're actually, they're completely irrelevant. And so in those works, they would say, if they were honest, and many did, one scholar, like guys like Irvin Abrahamian, right? They give it up for him. They're like, there was one scholar, UC Berkeley's Hamid Algar, who had it right and who called it out. So it's not as though Algar's let's say Algar's foresight, his vision has been completely ignored. But let me make the point. By putting out new books now, like King of Kings, Scott Anderson, 2025, this is all you need to know. Don't go back and read Irvin Abrahamian's Iran Between Two Revolutions, which goes in depth into what the deal was, focusing for the most part on the left, because Abrahamian's a lefty and devoted. No, don't read any of that stuff, because Anderson's cutting out all that historical BS and theoretical BS, just cutting right to the chase. So, again, thankfully, historians were honest, and Algar really did kind of acquire a second wind of legitimacy and popularity in the 80s when people were like, dude, you know, and I wish I could show the photo of Algar sitting there very respectfully with Imam Khomeini, listening and taking dictation, because he actually interviewed Khomeini to make sure, hey, I'm translating the Constitution like this. This is how I translated this. Is this what you meant by this? And so they hung out. They had discussions. He received, kind of like actual former CIA staffer Richard Cottam did in the early 80s, a sort of revival of his popularity based on his earlier vision and foresight. So,
well, what's interesting, and you mentioned that, and it is a great photo. Yeah, I wish we had loaded that one up. It's a great photo. But people can look up Hamid Algar and see a CIA, declassified CIA report in like 1979 or early 1980, involving like congressional sort of testimony, and the CIA kind of read his work and, tried to put together a dossier and counterpose his view, which was that it had social roots and wasn't just a kind of, epiphenomenon of the weakness of the regime, but like wasn't going to be easy to just overturn the revolution at that point. Versus somebody who was saying, oh, the people don't really, some other so-called expert who was saying, oh, the people don't really want this religious stuff. It's just that they hated the Shah so much. And, like if you just find a way to get rid of them, I'm sure, people would support a kind of regime change. And of course, this is the fantasy that they've been telling themselves for, 2 decades and more, is that it could easily be reversed. This is the kind of fantasy. Instead of saying, okay, it has its deep roots, whatever we're doing is actually strengthening the regime by imposing sanctions, by derailing like efforts at diplomacy. Since Khatami, the reform candidate, made all these overtures, tried his dialogue of civilizations effort at the UN, and trying to kind of say, hey, listen, we're all against these takfiris, that's not the vision of Islam that we have in Iran. Like he was even playing that, kind of game of like, hey, listen, we can come together on the grounds of like human values, from each of our civilizations. We've all made contributions to like collective human civilization, and we stand together against these kind of barbaric attempts to kind of impose, narrow, views, ethno-nationalist, kind of exclusion, all of these things, so there were all these overtures of diplomacy, of kind of like discourse on, cross-cultural and inter-civilizational discussion, and all of that. All these things have been dispensed with, because there's always been this kind of hostile, it must be reversed, we must reverse the revolution, and this fantastical and magical thinking that it could be done because the regime is totally unpopular. Yes, there are sources of discontent. Yes, people have criticisms, just like in all of these societies. And there are mobilized groups that really do, would like to see a very different kind of political culture in Iran. But one thing that I think we should talk about is, how the consequences of the 12-day war have, in fact, actually strengthened Iranian nationalism. And you don't have to be an adherent to, vilayat faqih, the doctrine of, the jur, the authority of the juror, the governance of the jurist, the doctrine that, is supposedly so significant and important in establishing the constitution and clerical authority in the judiciary in Iran, etc. You don't have to be an adherent to that to nonetheless be deeply committed to, the Iranian nation state. And you're somebody who's studied and published on nationalism in Iran, and you've always had a very interesting take, in your study of looking at the, Armenian community, but still characterizing and trying to understand how it is that they actually were committed to an idea of Iran and saw themselves as citizens of Iran and regarded themselves as nationalists. Perhaps that's part of the analysis that could help make sense and understand how it is that so many of the things that the US and Israel have done, thinking that they would achieve regime change and topple the regime, have actually backfired and strengthened, at least a broad-based Iranian nationalism.
Absolutely. And I'll just say, to link up your excellent question, where we're going to go now with what we were just talking about before, and that is the specter of another Israeli attack. Just keep this in mind, folks. Israel shot its wad, the whole multiple Mossad bases, the internal spike missiles, all of the drone factories. There might be one or two, there might be a cell here or there, but that internal subversive network has been largely done away with and exposed. They went for it. They shot their wad. So just saying, to foreground what I'm about to say about Iranian nationalism, that Israel does not have that wild card to pull either. So this would just have to be a direct, we're flying over and striking to start a war, and I don't think that's happening. Now, also with that, part of the plan was that, hey, the minute we strike the government of the Islamic Republic and kill some nuclear scientists and their families and some of the political elites, Iranians are going to rise up in a women, life, freedom type of anti-clerical movement, and they're going to overthrow their government. And so that's like our greatest potential strength going forward, is the Iranian people turning against their government. Particularly, they would be interested in turning religious and ethnic minorities against the government and breaking up the country into little ethnic, and
like
we're
seeing happen in Syria.
Exactly. No, that is the plan. And so I do try to speak in a limited to a limited amount of my own research. Generally, I'm just trained to do that because with undergraduates, I'm not spewing about my own research, but I will just say that, based on my own mixed American Armenian ethnic heritage, being born in Iran, therefore acquiring Iranian national identity and considering myself Iranian my entire life, I wrote my dissertation at Berkeley on this question of how could a group of people, in this case the Armenians of Iran, one of its oldest ethno-religious communities, but you could also apply this to the Jews of Iran, another one of its oldest ethno-religious communities that has its own religion, its own language, its own territory that at least it claims is its territory, its own unique script, claims to be, as Armenians do, the very first people that adhered to Christianity. How could these people ever consider themselves to be Iranian? Scholarship at the time, available scholarship, argued, and I mentioned Richard Cottam, his book Nationalism Iran was a seminal work, that there is no way that Armenians will ever be able to acquire Iranian national identity because they are just far too distant in terms of their culture, and one day we will realize this. And as I began my study, anyone who knows anything about Iran knows that that is just patently false, that Armenian Iranians maintain a very strong sense of Iranian national identity, a layered or hyphenated identity. And so let me cut to the chase. Yes, it's an Islamic Republic of Iran, but that Islamic Republic of Iran has maintained a civic nationalism, an inclusive civic nationalism that by necessity hyphenates and recognizes and values, whether fully values or needs to value for propaganda reasons all of the contributions and the history and the presence and the reality of the different religious and ethnic minorities. So, stamps honoring the Kurds and Kurdish nomadism and Kurdish Fabric Day, things like that, are at the core of my study, which focuses on Armenians. But the reason that I argue that Armenians are perhaps the best group to focus on is no one in Iran arguably is as far away, and that is in terms of, if you know the term propinquity, but that would be far away in terms of their religious orientation, their cultural orientation, their historical evolution in Armenia from what we could say are the primary essences of modern Iranian nationalism, right? Like Persian cultural identity and Shia Islam, right? Armenians and let's say Iranian Jews could be said to, in terms of propinquity, be pretty far away from Persian Shia Islam. Kurds, well, they're Muslim, so they could be a little bit closer. As per Khatam's view, propinquity meant the ability to accept Iranian nationalism, how close you were to Shia Islam or to Persian. And basically what I argue in my book and demonstrate, and I believe that this has been sustained through example, through the passage of the last 11 years, is that the hyphenated nature of Iranian nationalism that goes completely counter to what the father of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Reza Shah, was trying to do. He went for exclusive ethnic nationalism. You may not speak another language. You're speaking Persian. I'm closing Armenian schools, English schools, French schools, Arabic schools, whatever, we're all Persians here. That radically failed. And so Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and the subsequent Islamic Republic of Iran have had to, by necessity, take up the mantle and advance this big, wonderful tent of Iranian inclusive nationalism, a civic nationalism. And so I argued in my book very strongly that the idea, and this was in 2014 when it was published, but the idea that as the Obama administration was talking about, we can go in and spend money to agitate with the Kurds and the Baluchis and the Arabs and eventually break the Islamic Republic of Iran up, I argued directly that that's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. Interestingly, the Cato, Cato, the think tank, the sort of pro-war think tank, in 2019, they wrote a policy paper for Trump, for the Trump administration, regarding the potentials for an attack on Iran. And I was fascinated. They gave me a footnote. Basically, they said, you will not be able to use the religious or ethnic minorities to agitate against the central government because they have far too strong of a bond within Iranian nationalism. Footnote Yagubian, right? And they footnoted a couple other people who had made similar points. So what I'm saying is, it's an obscure footnote in a Cato report, but a 2019 report written for Bolton and Pompeo, who were planning an attack on Iran. And what they're basically arguing is that, there's evidence that Iran's civic nationalism is too strong, and you're not going to be able to just go in, bomb, kill some policemen in a regional police station, then get the locals to take up the mantle of overthrowing their government, because they have an identity within this government. This government recognizes them. This government values them, unlike the exclusive nationalist governments of, say, Turkey, which, if you're Kurdish or Armenian, you effed up and you need to change your name and come down from the mountains and remember who you are, right? So their civic nationalism is very different than exclusive ethnic nationalism. The Islamic Republic of Iran, even though people don't really seem to understand this or pay attention to this, it maintains a very strong civic nationalism that gives it up all the time for the Armenians, for the Assyrians, for the Jews, for the Zoroastrians, that goes out of its way. It's almost like reverse discrimination, folks. And I won't go off on this, but I can walk down the street in Iran during Ramadan smoking a cigarette and eating ice cream, and they will say Nushajan to me. Like, oh, that means like enjoy it to your health, right? It's kind of bizarre, but we have this like favored status. I mean, the Jews can get away with like stuff that I can't even get away with. I was in this guy's shop, a Jewish shopkeeper on Manocheri. We started talking and he immediately busted out the vodka and he's like, let's have a drink. And I'm like, no, dude, it's, and he's like, come on, you're Armenian. Like, it's our religion. Let's go. And I didn't have the shot, but just like, I mean, like leaning into it, right? anyway, I won't digress on the
Well,
anecdotes.
but yeah,
Saying they're very comfortable.
Mhm.
We have permanent representation in the parliament. The Jews, the Zoroastrians, the Armenians, the Assyrians, permanent seats reserved for us. There aren't permanent seats even reserved for the Sunnis or for the Arabs or for the Baluchis or for the Kurds. But Armenians, we get 2. Assyrians get 1. Jews get 1. Zoroastrians, I believe they get 2 still based on population. So anyway, what am I talking about here? The fact that not only did Iran's civic nationalism do its thing, which is like prohibit the entropic forces of separatism to tear apart the Islamic Republic. But moreover, and I'll make this point quickly because I know we're nearing the end of our time, but fascinatingly, the Islamic Republic has been able to employ and sort of cash in on and use the iconography, the narratives, as well as the songs of the royalists in a newly fortified post 12-day war version of Iranian nationalism. And there is no better and more stunning, I would even say shocking example of this than the fact that on the last day of the Ashura celebrations, when no one knew if Supreme Leader Sayyid Ali Khamenei was even going to show up, not only did he show up, he showed up and whispered, and I'm sure it was planned, right? But he whispered into the ear of the singer, who went and then sang a new version of the song A Iran, which is O Iran. This is the national anthem of the royalists. This is a royalist song. Iranians love the song. So if you're Iranian, you love the song, but you wouldn't go to the IRI and start singing A Iran. You just wouldn't do that. But guess what? You can do it now because they took the song back. The lyrics were so brilliant because they enfolded ancient Jahiliyyah, pre-Islamic Persian terms with Islamic terms, with commentary about the Imams, about Imam Husain, about Ashura. And so people were like losing it. I was losing it. It was a crazy moment. Like, what's going on here? So beautiful, so moving. That moment itself is a moment of strength that will propel the Islamic Republic and its identity further. I will just say on that note, they were showing, the camera was showing women, this was subsequent, who were watching this on screens without hijab, enjoying it. And Iranian news, which usually does not show Iranian women without hijab, was going out of its way to show the Iranian women without hijab enjoying and crying and shedding tears over A Iran. And then they cut to a statement from one of the Iranian ministers who said something to the effect of, we didn't know if all these people had their heads and hearts in the right place, but the kids are all right. Like they did the right thing. And so this now fortifies, if you will, the more, I don't know how you want to call it, the more Western oriented, the more secular oriented in terms of their style and their dress and maybe some of their culture. Like, that's okay as long as you support the Islamic Republic and our strength, and you're not supporting Zionist genocide and apartheid and baby killing on a minute-to-minute basis. We can work it out. And so there's like this new kind of internal reconciliation and respect. And I mean it, like respect by the more conservative, if you will, hardliners, to more sort of secular Western oriented Iranians who stepped up. And there have been so many quotes from Iranians who have, either in interviews, or I've heard this secondhand in interviews with colleagues such as Said Mohammad Marandi, like, wow, we never really knew if what you, that is Marandi, or members of the government were telling us about the true nature of the United States and Israel was true. But like, we saw it, we felt it, and like, right on, man. Chasen Abashi, that means don't get tired. Like, keep on keeping on. Do your thing, and that's a really glorious and beautiful thing. And so, I would just link this to the point that I was making, that Israel does not have its, internal Mossad networks to kill Iranian political elites and scientists anymore and to destabilize the country, nor does it have the aero missiles and aerial defenses to defend against Iranian missiles. And it's facing a newly fortified Iranian civic nationalism, which, another thing I just want to say, because I mentioned this in the other show that we did in June, but I had planned my last trip to Iran based on Trump's threat to bomb Iran 2 months from his threat, right? So I was like, I guess I should be there because some stuff's going to be happening. Oh God, wait. What was the point I was going to make about being there? God, it was something about the Oh man, I'm blanking. I'm sorry.
Well, while you're,
Yeah,
kind of
roll,
figuring
and I'll try to recollect.
what that point was, I mean, I think we've also, well, we've been prevented from really seeing it, but what I understand is that there have been a lot of reports that now these hijab laws are not really being
Oh,
enforced in any
I
serious way.
got it. I got
Yeah.
it. Sorry, before I forget it again. Thank you. Thank you. It was that when I was there, and this, remember, this is before the war, right? Because I left, and 6 days later the bombing started, right? I did realize that it was probably good that I wasn't there because I didn't bring enough money. I didn't realize that I would be there for probably over a month there anyway. So probably a good thing that I missed it. But the music in the streets. There has been a trend really since COVID and since the maximum pressure sanctions of music in the streets, people busking in the streets. Like I heard somebody cranking Money for Nothing, like full rock and roll, like Money for Nothing jam in Van Dyck Square a few years ago. So this has been growing, but folks, music is back, and music is like beloved, and now it's like in squares, in Engelab Square, in Taj Rish, in Van Dyck. Like it's a thing now. The musicians are there, the people are standing, Iranians are clapping and kind of moving and dancing, and no one is cracking down on this. And it's almost like, again, the demonstration of support for the government that the population showed allays government fears of things like people standing on the street clapping for a song. And so like it's a much more comfortable feeling with women wearing hijab, not wearing hijab, people playing music, people listening to music, people not listening to music and walking by. It just this was again about a week when I left before the war, but despite the maximum pressure sanctions, despite the tension, despite what was going on, I had never experienced a more sort of calm and kind of collected and easygoing Tehran. It was just things are really dialed in, and I believe continue to be being dialed in, and especially our national identity and our nationalism. So
Yeah,
thanks
well,
for bringing me back to that.
no. It's and I actually think that there's a couple of things that this stimulates me to recall to mind is that I think one other component of the civic Iranian nationalism is that they can build upon, in fact, actually also such a long continuous. This isn't one of these fantasies of like, okay, we invent that we had this like ancient past and a state. That whole point about the thousands, millennia long statecraft means that the many, many different communities of people over several thousands of years who have come into Iran, whether they're Turkic tribes, migration of diasporic communities like the Armenians, the fact that it's, changed. It used to be, a lot of people really recognize and understand that one of the pillars of modern national, kind of Iranian national identity, Shia Islam, is like something that's actually relatively recent when it comes to the majoritarian religious culture of Iran. It was Sunni until the 16th century, really. And so, but so it's incorporated, but it's always stayed as a state, basically, like. And so that's one component of it. The second is that what you were mentioning, that Marandi and others kind of really sort of surprised to learn and recognize that people themselves have now come to trust what they said about like Israel. Is the unmasking of this aggressive expansionist state, not only barbarically genociding, the Palestinians, but it's like a danger to the entire region. So all of that anti-imperialist critique of Zionism, critique of Israel, critique of Zionism as an ethno-nationalist fascistic kind of ideology, and Israel as an expansionist and dangerous settler colonial state, all of this has been proven by Israel's aggressive behavior towards Iran. So that's one other component. And the last thing is just what you've been mentioning about the civic kind of Iranian nationalism by even people who are kind of sort of secular, maybe, not especially adherent or observant of Shia Islam, is that they, as we've seen, maybe people kind of recognize and remember the video, right, of like a woman at a demonstration during the 12-day war, not wearing hijab, demanding a nuclear weapon,
Yes.
right? And so, in fact, actually, what has happened again in these imperial boomerangs is that they're trying to identify the problem as, oh, this is like Islam is this kind of very dangerous ideology. It's an oppressive, state. Is that, and if you have a nuclear armed Iran, wow, how horrible and terrible. It is in fact actually an Iranian national and maybe even secular project that is even more, because the Iranian doctrine, nuclear doctrine, has been it's a weapon of mass destruction, and therefore it should not be used because it is against our ethics. But a secular Iranian militant nationalism would overcome those qualms, and those demands are being made. And if you see what the Amir Mousavi comments were when he said, oh, there could be in a matter of hours 24 nuclear weapons and so on, he also mentioned in that interview with the Iraqi media that there have been actual pressures and demands upon the clerical elite to reconsider that doctrine. And so in fact, actually, what do you be careful of what you wish for. You want to weaken the kind of Islamic kind of character of the state. Well, what you're going to get is militant, a militant third world anti-imperial nationalism actually taking place. And that's, always been also identified as, something that would resist U.S. imperial designs in the region. So I think that's actually kind of ironic and interesting in this process that you've been talking about. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, there's so much to talk about. The chat has been, really tremendous. There was a whole topic that, we were thinking if we had time, we might get into, but I think, maybe we'll have to have you back on again, Dave, to talk about like U.S. imperial decline. You had a really fascinating way, I thought so funny and interesting, but actually rooted in something real way of, thinking that we need to talk about the sick man of the West, the
Western question.
There's a whole Western question to be dealt with here. So we'll have to have you come back on to talk about that at some point really soon. But I just want to say I so much enjoyed the conversation with you and having you on, and your analysis is just such a privilege. And, it's just great to have old friend and colleague to talk to about these things. It means so much to me to be able to have this, and this is the whole point of office hours, to have a kind of relaxed, fun, but serious conversation with people who have expertise, and to engage with the audience questions. And we had a rich discussion in the chat, and a lot of people with a great deal of insight and knowledge as well. Who I hope, to continue my collaborations. Resistance is Fertile. We're going to be having, as I said, a live stream on Monday, discussion with Radhika Desai about geopolitical economy and the ends of capitalism. So we'll be talking about all the big kind of geopolitical economic issues. But, look for the Yemen series. I really want to push and promote that, because there is no community that has done more in solidarity for Palestine. Although we've been talking about Iran, and that also goes under appreciated, and something that we've talked about as well, that the whole axis of resistance. But the Yemen is a part that's known less than almost any others. And so people are very surprised by, who are, these so-called Houthis? Who is Ansarullah? What kind of a movement is it? And how is it rooted, in fact, actually deeply in distinctive Yemeni history of resistance to empire and to global capitalism and to a kind of globalization sort of process? So I do want people to go learn from Dr. Issa Bloomy. There's two parts. The first part is out. But like this video, share it. It's now available. We'll be closing the stream any moment. It'll be available as a video. Share it with people. I think they have a lot to learn from what David, was telling us about Iran. And, I'm just so grateful to have this community developing. Thank you so much for being here. Look out not only for, the Monday stream, but also I need to also tell you about Sunday. The struggle session is
Mm.
back, the third struggle session. It's a live stream panel program that's a little bit inspired by tanky therapy, but with a slightly different emphasis. We're not there to make you feel better. Okay. We got to talk about the serious stuff, and we have to be self-critical because we have not stopped this genocide. We have not, the point of this knowledge, as Marx said is, up to this point, the philosophers have, studied, to understand the world, but the point is to change it. So this analysis, having expertise, this knowledge is meant to propel us to action because we need to change this broken world. So that's what the struggle session is for. It's kind of in the same sort of spirit as office hours, but with a larger group, and to be self-critical about our own movements and to spur us to action. I hope you'll join me on Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. in West Asia. And I'll have Lara Sheehy on, a radical Palestinian psychoanalyst and writer. We'll have Henry Hakamaki, my co-host from Guerrilla History, Nick Cruz from Revolutionary Blackout Network. He's been doing amazing stuff recently. We're going to have him on. And who else? We have a fourth guest. Mira Woods. Yes, Mira Woods from the International Committee of the DSA. You have to follow her on Twitter. She's vicious, at Snack Vampire. And so we have a great panel. So I want to, hopefully I'll see many of you out there as well. So again, thank you, Dave, so much.
Thank you
for joining and for sharing your analysis and expertise and knowledge. And as I said, it's just it's so fun being with you in these difficult times. We need that friendship. We need that solidarity. And you're a great friend for coming on and sharing your knowledge with our audience. So thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Adnan, for having me. Bless you. This all of the different shows that you've been putting together, your channel, I'm just really inspired by it and hope that I can contribute and support it however possible. It's really meaningful, and I deeply appreciate the questions and the comments today, all the way there to make us rage better, all the way through the last one. So this is really wonderful. I was looking forward to it all week, and I didn't know if anybody would show up, but I was just psyched to talk about all this stuff with Adnan, and maybe one or two people would watch it when it was posted to YouTube. So this has just really been wonderful. Again, bless you, brother. Love you, and I'll be seeing you on Sunday and Monday, because I'm going to be tuning in for both. I'm really excited for the struggle session, the concept, the idea there. As I was a big tanky therapy fan, I'm deeply committed to being a viewer of that, and as well, Radhika, just love her work, love her commentary. She's so awesome, whether it's with her, with Michael Hudson, just great insights. So I was really psyched when I saw that you were going to be hosting her. So looking forward to that. Thank you again.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And it's so much fun. We would have had fun, even if nobody came, we would have had fun, but it was so much more fun and interesting to have all of you with us. So we'll see you soon for more of these kinds of programs. I want to thank you again and just wish you peace and solidarity. Take care, everyone.